This is NDTV. And you're watching Ndtv-Hindu.
Good evening and welcome to Headlines now on Ndtv-Hindu. I'm Evelyn Matthew. An announcement by the Madras High Court today has many circles wondering if the politics in the state is turning out to be a vindictive one after all. Well, Amma may have said that that was certainly not the case while in the capital yesterday, but on the field has it turned out to be that way after all? The Secretariat in Tamil Nadu will finally work out from the Fort St. George campus itself, even as the future looms large over the future of the shining Omandur complex. But after a back and forth over these issues, the ball is now back in Amma's court. From the uniform system of education, the colour television scheme to the housing schemes, there's been a deliberate deletion of projects of sorts from Amma's syllabus. We try to read between the lines with help from senior journalist Jnani and Mr. K. Venkatramanan, the Deputy Chief of Bureau from the Hindu. Before we get into that discussion, the headlines we're tracking at this hour. A day after Amma asks Dr. Singh for relief on the Mullai Periyar Dam issue, among other issues, Kerala says their demand for a new dam in place stands. The Madras High Court dismisses the petition challenging the shifting of the Secretariat. The ball is now in Amma's court. Karunanidhi is quick to react, says Tamil Nadu will have to suffer the consequences of what he now calls a mistake. A little birdie courtesy actor Dhanush tweets that the superstar Rajnikant is out of the hospital. He's back in the pink of his health and resting. The Madras High Court summons the Housing and Poverty Alleviation Department on the delay in enactment of a new law to prohibit manual scavenging.
Policy decision has been taken by the government and that is being shifted. That cannot be the subject matter in a public interest litigation.
Will the All India Bar examinations be scrapped? The Bar Council of Tamil Nadu and Puducherry passes a resolution asking the decision to be reconsidered. Advocates in the city press for a speedy investigation into the death of a law student, as the motive into the alleged murder still remains a mystery. The anti-graft wave spreads to the city of Chennai. Civil activist Traffic Ramaswamy goes on an indefinite fast, calling for the government support for the
Traffic Ramaswamy has started on 20th fasting to implement the scheme of Lokpal Sabha bill.
And ahead of his Tamil film, actor Siddharth says it has been a riveting journey, zigzagging between Tamil, Hindi and Telugu film industries.
Which I earned in a certain way, it took me years to make it in Telugu or in Tamil or anywhere.
Let's also take you through what's been making headlines across the nation and the world as well. A Pakistan naval warship to escort the released ship MV Suez with Indians on board. The sailors tell NDTV the Indian Navy is not helping. The government speaks up finally, says it has advised the ship owners to provide protection, but they really didn't. 3 Chota Shakil gang members detained for the murder of crime reporter Jay Day. He had exposed sandalwood smuggling. Delhi's Sri Ram College's 100% cut-off for non-commerce students evokes strong reactions.
Why me? Even Shakespeare wouldn't have made it into an English honours course if these were the cut-off points and the marks.
BJP President Nitin Gadkari takes on the Congress President on corruption. The Congress hits back. Including the Prime Minister under Lokpal is not closed. Law Minister Moily tells NDTV hours before the meeting with Anna Hazare's activists. The celestial spectacle tonight, the longest and darkest lunar eclipse. Everyone prays for clear skies. Fort St. George, the architectural marvel of Chennai city, has been the centre of some bad blood between the present and the past regimes here in the state of Tamil Nadu. The ball has now come to J. Jayalalitha's court today after the Madras High Court dismissed the petition that had challenged the shifting of the Secretariat from the Omandur complex to the historic Fort St. George. The High Court added that it cannot interfere with the administration of the state government and that this was a pure policy decision to be taken up.
During the hearing, His Lordship, the Chief Justice of Madras High Court, made an observation stating that shifting of officers from one place to another place is on the basis of administrative convenience and on the basis of which policy decision has been taken by the government and that is being shifted. That cannot be the subject matter in a public interest litigation. And further he made an observation that public interest litigation is not meant for these kind of purposes. Hence, the first bench of the Madras High Court was pleased to dismiss the public interest litigation filed by the petitioner.
Well, the DMK chief M. Karunanidhi has been quick to react in his latest salvo. He says, and I quote, "People of Tamil Nadu will have to suffer the consequences of their mistake," unquote. Well, let's just discuss what this really plays out in the political circles here in Tamil Nadu. Joining me this evening is Mr. Gnani, senior journalist, and Mr. K. Venkatramanan, Deputy Chief of Bureau with the Hindu newspapers. First up to Mr. Gnani. Sir, the spate of moves made by Amma with regard to the uniform syllabus or even the Secretariat in this case are only reminiscent of the vindictive moves characteristic of the two Dravidian heavyweights. Do you really see this as a healthy trend?
So I have a very mixed response to the whole issue. Some of the issues she is raising are valid. Some of the issues are not valid. So I look at it as a mixed bag. I won't straight away dub it as vindictive. At the same time, I won't say that all that she does is proper.
Right, Mr. Venkatramanan, just to bring you in here, do you believe this is now a new tradition of sorts among the Dravidian parties? Have you observed this kind of tit for tat in other parts of the country?
Yes, given the, I'm not sure about other parts of the country, but given the history of animosity between these two parties, it's hardly surprising. Some of the, as Mr. Gnani said, it's, one's response will have to be mixed because, on the one hand, there is a certain need for some changes, but, the government of the day has to balance the, balance between the need for a change and the desire to change everything. And the need is, I suppose, it should be based on the actual requirement, whether we need educational reforms, whether we need a new syllabus, whether we need to weed out some overtly political elements in the syllabus. That's the need. But the desire to, overturn everything that the previous regime had done, sometimes that overwhelms the present regime, and that is why we have this situation. This, I suppose, an element of politicization is inevitable in this process.
Right, but as much as Ms. Jayalalitha has been pressing for the development factor, that she is continuing to work for the state, and do you believe that in all of this, some time and the governance is really lost in this? Don't you believe that is really being lost in this among all of this?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yes, because on the one hand the government has a development agenda. On the other hand, it seems to be busying itself with some decisions which may have been postponed to another year. I thought her priorities would be, say, the power situation, law and order, and some more administrative matters, concerning the state's finances and such things. But she seems to have gone into overdrive on, some elementary things like, the location from which the government should operate. And I'm not sure whether there was a need to tinker with the syllabus this year. It could have been, studied in more detail and introduced from the next year onwards. Certainly, governance does suffer if the government, preoccupies itself with things that it need not be so high on its priority list.
Right, I just want to bring in Mr. Gnani as well and pose the same question to you. But before that, the DMK can ill afford play that sympathy card now. But when in power, they too have been seen engaging in similar moves against their Dravidian rival Amma at that time.
In fact, if you look at the past history, between 91 to 96 and then 96 to 2001, both governments were quite vindictive to each other. But at the same time, during the last two regimes, they were both mellowed. There had been a slight improvement in their behavior.
Right, but do you feel, sir, this is at the end of the day some deep-rooted political play that has been at work ever since the days of MGR?
Yes, they have been trading blows right from the beginning. It all started with the Karunanidhi-MGR rivalry. That was the beginning point.
So do you believe then that this is turning out to be a case of convenience over just politics, and more important, more importantly, who are really the big stakeholders in this tug of war? Who are the biggest losers and winners in this game?
In fact, the real stakeholders, as we know, are the people, and the real losers are always the people. People have nothing to gain out of this. The only gain people are getting out is that whenever DMK is in power and out, ADMK comes and then starts exposing DMK. And again, when DMK comes to power, it starts exposing ADMK. So the only gain people get are, they get to know what kind of mismanagement both have been doing. That is the only gain. But otherwise, the mismanagement, the real losers are the people. Look at this uniform syllabus issue. The schools have been delayed now by about 1.5 months, which means a huge tension for the parents and students. So ultimately, the real losers are the children. And DMK messed up the uniform syllabus by including Karunanidhi's kind of lessons in projection of Karunanidhi. So the whole thing started the game. So losers are the people.
So the losers, the people of Tamil Nadu themselves, do you share similar thoughts, Mr. Venkatramanan?
Yeah, in a highly politicized atmosphere, such such opinions are inevitable. As he said, it started with the MGR Karunanidhi rivalry, but this is what happens when politics has ceased to be a competition based on ideology. This is essentially a state where politics is woven around personalities, and we have big personalities who have larger than life images, and after the deterioration of the Congress as a political force in the state, it is now a competition in pursuing personal glory, in self-aggrandizement, of which Mr. Karunanidhi gave a lot of example in the previous regime. And when governance itself is mixed up with self-projection, any attempt to undo, even though the misdeeds of the previous government seem to come out of seem to appear vindictive, that change for change's sake, even though changes sometimes may be necessary. This is the unfortunate part of it. And naturally, when the people do get affected by this larger trend.
Right. Do you believe then that perhaps maybe in the years to come, people may just stop paying too much of attention to election manifestos? Is there a fear of dilution then? Because anyway, one party is going to scrap out the projects of the other.
See, the election manifesto has suddenly, acquired center stage in the election scene after 2006. 20 years ago, people did not take much note of it because no one really believed that some promises are meant to be delivered. But, when the government descended to, an election campaign solely rooted in populism, and once, the state government, the elected regime realizes that it has, enough resources to splurge on some of its populist schemes, to the detriment of, some long-term infrastructure building activity, the manifesto has now become central to the politics of the state. What you promise, it's delivered, and there is an attempt to deliver it, in the first few years of the new regime. And given the fact that whether they are actually reaching the people, there is an appearance that these promises are being fulfilled. As such, there is an impression among the political leaders that people actually vote on the basis of manifestos, but I'm not sure whether that is the case at all, because they may have 100 other issues in mind when they vote in or vote out a government.
So one can't really go by seeing is believing then. But thanks very much indeed, Mr. Venkatraman and Mr. Gnani, for joining us this evening on that special discussion. On to some more news that's of huge importance to the state of Tamil Nadu and even neighbouring Kerala. The Congress-led UDF government in Kerala has said that there was no change in their stand that a new dam be constructed at Mullai Periyar in place of the existing one. Chief Minister Umman Chandi said that there is no change so far in the state government's stand in this issue, whether it is the UDF or even the LDF. The statement comes a day after Tamil Nadu's Chief Minister Jayalalitha sought Prime Minister's intervention on the issue during that big meeting in the national capital yesterday. Kerala's demand for a new dam was not a position against Tamil Nadu and not against its interests, is what Mr. Chandi said today. But Kerala and Tamil Nadu have been at loggerheads over the question of building a new dam. which will replace the current 110-year-old structure at Mullai Periyar. In fact, this is where both the states, in fact, border. But while Kerala has been pressing for it, citing safety aspects of the existing one, Tamil Nadu is worried that the state would not get sufficient quantity of water to irrigate parts of Madurai district. The dispute is under the consideration of the Supreme Court, which has appointed a high-power committee to look into safety and other aspects of the existing structure. There's good news on the superstar's health from Singapore City. A little birdie from the Twitter space sent by Dhanush. His son-in-law has said that Rajinikanth has been discharged from the hospital. The superstar's son-in-law added in that tweet that he has recovered completely and is taking rest. This has been confirmed and the family is believed to be on their summer vacation now. And there's been a message going to the Chief Minister as well. Rajinikanth, in fact, called up Ms. Jayalalitha to tell her that he is completely well, and he even wished Ms. Jayalalitha on her electoral victory. This is, remember, the first time that he's spoken to her ever since her win. He did send out a written message of congratulations to Jayalalitha on the 13th of May, but that was through his two daughters. Up ahead on headlines now, even a 90% on your mark sheet is not good enough these days. The gates of the Delhi University are shut to you and would have even been for Shakespeare.